Good to go, except for the recording, of course.
And except for this.
Yeah.
Interesting scenarios the insurance company has to prepare for. Man.
And there goes the camera. All right, let's see what's wrong with it now.
If, hello, Savannah Rose. Oh, Lord, so good.
Yeah, so far. So good.
Hello, Gary.
Waste, it's not losing weight or except it's waste, it just won't go down. You don't need to lose any more weight, he thinks he does with that suit. So he hasn't had that one very long.
It's cold back here.
Yes, it is.
It was cold here Tuesday morning.
Because we get up here and nobody's been up here, you know, in the class, Tuesday morning sometimes it's too cold. Well, I have been about this deep under paperwork for the next quarter, because I'm teaching the little ones next quarter. Finally today, I got it all cut out and glued and everything and all that for the lab books.
I actually had a new phone.
Did you get you one like that?
This is Tommy's old one.
No,
No, this is Tommy's old one. He needed a new one because of work, and his, it won't update anymore. It's an i5. And he didn't, for, you know,
Right.
he did, and so,
You're gonna bravely learn how to use one like that.
it's kind of fun. Yeah. It's, a lot of the other stuff is easier on my old one. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Dale was gonna give me his old one last time, but I still don't wanna use it.
Well, this is kind of neat. This has the weather and
Oh, and all you gotta do is push a button?
yeah. I mean,
Oh.
and I have my Bible on there, and because I have it on this, I was able to switch to this because I'm missing it.
Oh,
And so,
yeah.
of course, it's too small. At least I have it if I need it to anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's kind of neat. You know, it's fun. What's fun is
So you have more.
doodads. Yeah, and the camera's a lot easier to use too. And then, and how I have the option of saying the sounds and stuff like that
Yeah.
for whoever calls, that I know.
Right, yeah, like Bill does, like he's got,
Yeah.
your son is calling you.
I have it on silent now. And then when it's easier to turn on silent, right here I go like this, I got to push the little thing there to make it won't go off. And Jatan's is sound by the seaside, because she likes the beach and stuff like that. And Jared's, dog barking. And my brother is a motorcycle. And my really older friend, well yeah, she's 89, she has an old-timey phone rings and stuff. And so when I get a text, I will do the same thing, and this is kind of fun, but I wasn't just going to get one, but since because his was for his birthday and anniversary for the next 5 years.
Right, yeah, I know, this is
But I
good.
mean, he did need it, because, you know, like, you know, for flights
Well,
and
yeah.
this, and so, I mean, he could,
Right.
and so, all mine costed me like $5 for the SIM card, you know, because they used his old SIM card, and this one, and then everything was just switched over. And so I just had to buy me a SIM card, it was $5, that was enough for them to switch it over. And so I got me
Yeah, good.
but it's not, I was gonna put this on there, but it's not very pretty, but we had just gotten this for him, we had to replace, because this right here kind of came apart. And so I kept, these are really, they're auto, and it won't, it's nothing happened to it, but it's not very pretty. But it's years red. But some, but,
Who cares?
yeah.
Once it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dale's gonna have to update his pretty soon too. His is getting
I gotta
old.
see.
Well,
Oh, how you doing?
Oh, I can't take.
Very partly cloudy.
Fair,
Yeah.
partly cloudy.
Oh, Mom would say fair to be
You just
one.
amaze me, Cal, you really do.
Be like Energizer.
Super energizer battery.
Did you want me to tell you about the barn burning down, the cow going dry? My wife running off with a vacuum cleaner salesman? Did you want all bad news?
No.
I know you did. So fair to partly cloudy. Are you happy with that now?
Yeah. Shopping still, you amaze me.
I know, Mom was lost, when my mom, all that she went through, people were surprised, how come you're not, well, Mom's all gloomy all the time, okay, but you know.
No, not just something that's healthy, like
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
and just goes and just.
Yeah, you wouldn't, yeah.
But then there was.
Check yourself in the hospital, get all over it.
Cell phone.
Been there, done that.
For,
Gal's gonna come in there and shave me. She wanted to shave me all these different places. Look, honey, this is the only place you need to go.
There you go.
And she said, well, I gotta make, I said, listen,
No, all four of us are getting it.
this is not my first rodeo.
It should be going to the spam folder.
No.
This will be stint number 11. There's only one place they can go. I've had open heart surgery and everything else.
You'll
can't
be
get-
go shaking.
They can't get there any other way.
Yeah, my brother had open heart, and his inside he still, well, the incision still kind of hurts a little bit, but then the inside he's doing really good. He had a double bypass.
A double bypass?
Mm-hmm.
You had a quadruple.
Yeah.
You're gonna have.
I've already done it. I had that.
Come in, come in,
Now,
come
I've had
in.
11 stints since then. So I told Billy, he says, he doesn't have any room for stents, he's all metal now. Just take everyone's come in.
You're the bionic man, are you?
So you don't get MRIs, do you?
No, my father.
That would be bad.
Comes with cheese.
Do what?
Has something to do with
If you get an MRI, it comes
I saw
with
it, so I said,
real quick.
you can't
Yeah.
have that.
The clock on the wall says it's time to start. And the only people I know that are sick right now, I'm sure we have others, but Leanne and John Coben are not feeling well. So I want to remember them. Maxine was here yesterday morning for Bible class, but she doesn't get out at night now. Her sons won't let her get out
You say
at
Dan and
night.
Judy? Yeah. Dan and Judy are sick.
Dan and Judy's sick.
They got the flu.
They have the flu?
They had the flu.
Yeah, they had the flu. Yeah, you had the flu. I'm not sure about John. John was here Sunday, but he's not here tonight, so I'm not sure about him.
I never get it.
Anyway, we're in chapter 42. We left off at verse 12 last week. But we have to start all over from last week because I forgot to record and stream it, so I have to do the whole last week's class over again.
I don't think so.
Just kidding.
Well, that's okay. I wasn't here last.
We weren't here last week, so you can do it over.
Oh, so I can do it over and y'all wouldn't
That
know
was
the
on
difference,
nights
would
last
you?
week. We won't be here next week either, so.
Yeah, I
we could-
will. I'm working.
over too.
I got 5 weeks of day shifts.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't know.
Stephanie still.
And I talked to Stephanie yesterday. She's still hacking and everything, but because of Sprint and everything, it
She
forces
can
her
go to jail for
work.
that.
Huh? Do what?
Go for jail
So
for hacking.
bad.
Yeah, well, not that kind of hacking now.
Kelvin actually went to a hacking convention and got a certificate for it.
Wow.
So anyway, the good news is I have completed the book of Exodus. So when we finish this, we'll be able to go right into Exodus, and I'm, with the help of Rhonda and John, I'm making a real nice little handout for you folks that does have some questions for each chapter. Well, they're simple. 5 of them's true and false. Once in a while, I have a matching.
I like those. That's a good.
And 5 is generally multiple choice. And then there's 5 fill in the blanks.
Unless the answer is maybe true, maybe false.
No, multiple choice. Multiple choice, you always put C.
I just don't know.
If you don't know the answer, always put C. All right, let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Our most loving Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for this day and for the many blessings You've given us. And we thank Thee, Father, for this privilege we have to be able to come together to encourage one another and to be able to study Thy Word without fear of persecution. We're thankful, Father, for your Son who loved us enough to die upon the cross that we might have everlasting life and be faithful to thee. And we're thankful for the talents of this congregation and ask that you would be with each one of us, that we might utilize those talents you've given us, that truly this congregation can grow spiritually, and with that spiritual growth would be numerical growth. We ask, Father, that you be with our members who have physical ailments. We have some with respiratory tract infections, some with the flu, and some with physical afflictions. We ask that you'd be with each one of them, that they might be restored to their health. And we ask that you would use us as instruments to reach out and help in any way that we can. We ask also, Father, that you'd be with our government officials, that they would work in a bipartisan effort, that truly they can solve the problem of this country, and this country can continue to be free, so that we can continue to serve thee without fear of persecution. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Hello, Pat.
Okay.
That means John must be sneaking in the door. There's John.
I'm gonna sneak in anywhere.
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm 6'6", you can't sneak.
Come on in.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll accept that. We're in Genesis, the 42nd chapter. And I told John Sunday that I had to teach this last Wednesday's class over again because I didn't record it. But he didn't watch it last Wednesday, or he would have called and said, "Hey, I can't get anything." He was sick. We're going to begin at verse 12. And what's happening here in chapter 42 is Joseph's brothers, except Benjamin, have now come to Egypt for food. Remember, we've had 7 years of drought. We had 7 years of plenty. And now we're in 7 years of drought. And so Joseph's brothers have come to get food. And so Joseph is testing them, and that brings us to verses 12 and 13. So let's begin reading there, if you will. Isaac, why don't you read 12 and 13 for us, please?
But he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And he said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the son of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more."
All right, now remember what's taking place here is that Joseph has asked them, or basically accused them of being spies. So they're saying, "No, we're 12 brothers." Now, if they were spies, they wouldn't be brothers and everything. That's the point that they're making here at this time. In your handout, this is capital letter D on page 107 if you're using your handout, all right? So, Joseph pushes his brothers until he receives the information that he's seeking. Yes, John?
The spies, they lie about being brothers.
Well, they might do that. But see, Joseph knew who they were.
I know.
And he was testing them at that time. So finally, what happens is they crack and they tell Joseph their life story. And there's no need to divulge all of this information, but pressure can make people talk when they should remain quiet and say things of no relevance in a grasping effort to preserve themselves. So again, the irony is thick when they tell Joseph that he is dead. You see, they don't recognize Joseph at this time. Remember now, he's clean shaven. He's dressed in an Egyptian dress. And so the last time they saw him, he was 17 years old. And now he's a grown man. He's changed in his physical appearance and everything. So they don't recognize him, but he knows who they are. And so they're telling him that he's dead. So now let's look at verses 14 through 17. Ron, you want to read that for me, please?
But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested, to see whether there is any truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison 3 days.
All right, so now Benjamin is very important to Joseph because he's the younger brother, but he's a full brother to Joseph. Okay, they had the same mother. And so he wants to make sure that they haven't done something to Benjamin, because Benjamin has now become the favored son in Joseph's mind to his father. And so he wants to make sure that Benjamin's alive, that nothing has happened to him. And so Joseph remains unconvinced and further develops his plan to test his brothers, is what he's doing. They will be thrown in prison when one returns home to bring Benjamin back. If he returns, their story then is corroborated, and they will be released. So this is his way of continuing the test. So to show that he is serious, he places his brothers in prison for 3 days. Any comments through verse 17? All right, Jensen, read verses 18 to 19 for me, please.
On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your household."
All right.
18
So,
and 19, right?
Do what?
18 and 19?
Yeah, 18 and 19. So this expression might surprise and perhaps encourage Joseph's brothers at this point. But his chief design seems to have been this. By declaring that he is a supposed Egyptian, feared God, and would not do injustice, he meant to awaken their remorse, who, though educated in the true religion, had not been restrained by the fear of God from cruelly treating their brother. Okay? So this shall be the proof of your honesty, he's basically saying. Instead of sending one of you to your father, you shall all go, but one who shall remain bound in prison. So he's going to keep one and let the rest go, until you bring your younger brother back, and in the meantime carry provisions for your family. So he's showing a generosity here. He's letting them take provisions back to the family. Because remember, the wives and the children are still back there. So this is a good, kind gesture of Joseph. And that statement, "I fear God," helps these brothers here to maybe start thinking a little bit. Jensen?
And you notice that he didn't make them pay for the grain that he gave them to take back. Because they went to buy grain from him, right? Because of the famine. He said, "Here, take grain."
The scripture doesn't say whether
Yeah,
he
but
made
it doesn't say, but then it appears that he just gave them grain
Yeah.
to take back.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other comments? Yes, Pat?
I hope this doesn't start a whole landslide, but I was so curious about the fact that it said that he, as an Egyptian, supposedly said, "For I fear God."
Yeah.
Does this mean that the Egyptians actually did fear the Almighty?
Not really.
Is that just,
Yeah. In fact, when we get into the study of Exodus, you'll see that
Yeah.
every plague that God put upon the Egyptians was based on a god. Because what God was doing with the Egyptians was showing that he was the God, not their gods, little g's. Okay? So this was something that was unusual to the brothers here for an Egyptian to say, "I fear God."
it's unusual for me to hear it too.
Yeah.
That I didn't just read across, that I paid attention to it.
Yeah.
Verse 25 says Joseph commanded that their money be put in their sacks with the corn.
Okay.
So they did pay for it.
Yeah,
They
and I
restored the
thank you,
money.
John, I forgot that statement, yeah, because we're gonna get to that. But yeah, he made them pay for it, but then he put the money back in there. There's a reason why he did that, and we'll see that a little bit later in this chapter. Yes, Cal?
Well, there was a there was a period of time in Egypt when the other people came in and had managed to conquer Egypt and were ruling it. I believe at one time they were called the Hyksos. I don't know what their name was, but they apparently were there when these events with Joseph took place.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they were overthrown and thrown out, and that's when the Pharaoh rose, who didn't know the Hebrews. So apparently these people were desert people, and they may have adopted the gods of the land. It appears that they did, because if you mess with people's religion, it can generally get them upset. But if you let the people just keep doing what they've been doing, they'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
One ruler is just as bad as another. So, and apparently some of them may have believed in God. Now, does it mean they worshipped him? or were faithful to him or think, but they may believe that he exists. So, I think so the fact that Joseph tells them this, that should give them a clue possibly.
Yeah.
But he says this to them, and so I guess that might be reassuring to them that he will honor his word. I don't know.
But he's still testing them.
Oh, yes.
And so that brings us to verses 21 and 22. Kimberly, you want to read that?
Sure. Then they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us."
Okay, in your handout, it's on page 108, cap letter E now. And as I have up here, when evil happens in our lives, we often go back into the past in order to attribute some sinful actions of ours for its cause. So punishment and confinement had done what their brothers and fathers' tears had been unable to do, and that was to touch their hearts and elicit a confession. Reuben's words have often been seen as righteous indignation, though they are little more than a glorified "I told you so." It seems that the brothers never told Reuben that they sold Joseph into slavery, because they believed that he would have revealed this to Jacob. And Reuben believed Joseph to be dead. And so the plot continues to thicken. Verses 23 through 25, John.
They knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. And he turned himself about from them and wept, and returned to them again and communed with them, and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them provisions for the way, and thus did he unto them.
Okay. Now in your handout, this is capital letter F. Joseph is not a man who has revenge in his heart. And we'll look at Genesis 37 here in just a minute. But the idea here is that Joseph was standing by during this conversation. And as you saw from this scripture here, this was another reason why his brothers didn't recognize him, because he was speaking in a language that they didn't understand, but he understood their language. And so he was standing by during in this conversation, because he had been speaking through that interpreter. They had no way of knowing that he spoke and understood Hebrew. So Joseph wept because he recognized repentance in them. If his original intention was only to retain Benjamin, it may have changed here to a plan to see the precise level and of change in the brothers. Simeon was chosen as the brother who would remain behind. Now, perhaps Joseph had planned to keep the oldest until he learned of Reuben's stand against the brothers. Reuben being the oldest brother. Okay, but again, Reuben thought Joseph was dead. He didn't know that he had been sold in slavery. So, he chooses the next oldest, and the one who, with a history of violence, may have been a ringleader of cruelty on the day that Joseph was sold. In addition to sending the brothers away with grain, then, he sends them away with the money that they used to buy it. We're not told why this is, but commentators have made various suggestions, and I won't go into those suggestions or anything because it's not really important and relevant to the story. But regardless of the motive, doing this forced the brothers to face their past. Previously, they had placed more value on money than life. Go back to Genesis 37, if you will. And Pat, if you'd read verses 26 and 27 for me.
So Judah said to his brothers,
what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened.
Okay, so they were more interested in money than life here, and now Joseph is testing their loyalty to Simeon and how much harder it would be to return for Simeon when they appeared to be thieves. Okay, so he's continuing to test them as to their loyalty, and eventually he will reveal himself when the time comes. Any comments through verse 25?
A little later on, don't he mention the reason why? Because they asked when they came back just a little later on, a little further on down the story, I believe. But they come back with the grain, and they were talking to the stewardess of the house, or Joseph, and they said, we brought the grain back. She said, don't worry about it. I think God blessed you, or something like that, or
brought the money back.
Yeah. I think that was the reason. I don't know if Joseph did it, but I think the guys told him to not worry about it because it was God being good to you.
Yeah, because when they got back and everything with the grain and everything, and they saw the money was in the sack,
They were a little worried.
they were afraid that Joseph would accuse them of stealing that. After all, he's already accused them of being spies, and now this money's there, so now they're going to be accused of thieves as well. So this is kind of an interesting story when you think about it, John.
I was thinking about what you said about they valued money more than life. I don't think they valued the money more than the life. They just didn't want to kill their brother, and they figured out they could get a profit out of it by leaving him alive.
Well, that's
So
possible.
that's not really valuing life more, the money more than the life, because they want to keep it. They had the choice. They could either sell him or kill him.
And the suggestion is that some really wanted to kill him. But
Well, that's obvious if you read the scripture.
yeah, but they were persuaded to sell him rather, and so when you think about the vengefulness here, where some wanted to kill him, and they were persuaded to sell him as a slave, then that would suggest that okay, the money is more. We value the money more than we do taking his life. So yeah.
Well, apparently, Reuben said put him in the hole.
Right.
Planning on coming and getting him.
Right.
Apparently, they sold him when Reuben was not present.
Right.
Apparently, he never learned the lesson, as you said. Okay.
Right.
So, Reuben here, while he has compassion for his father, I think, and he has compassion for him. Okay. But Simeon and Levi were a couple of tough guys, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you're right that Simeon was probably the ringleader there, and Reuben was left out of it. Now, we see Reuben later on, once again, is showing compassion,
Right.
and is willing to take responsibility. So
The problem with Reuben, as we all know, is if you think back and everything, what was the one thing that Reuben did?
Slept with
father's
his
wife.
father's.
Yeah, and so Reuben was never given that place as the firstborn that normally they would be given. He had lost the
Preeminence.
the what?
Preeminence
Yeah, the preeminence.
of the firstborn.
Well, the birthright.
The birthright. He lost all that because of the sin that he had committed. But he did have compassion here, and in his mind, he would have never wanted Joseph to be killed.
No.
But in his mind, Joseph was killed. And so this is where we are with it at this point. Yeah, John.
If Joseph was killed, why did they have to kill a kid to get the blood to put all over the coat? He should have already had his blood on it.
Well, but they did that, see, because
They did that when Reuben come around.
Cover their tracks.
They got the coat there and there's no blood on it, so why would Reuben think he was dead?
Reuben wasn't there when they put the blood on the
I
coat.
don't think so.
Yeah, he was.
And they put the
Yeah,
blood
he
on.
was.
They put the blood on the coat to take it to Jacob.
He was there before they put the blood on the coat.
He would have seen the.
He come back and that's when they put the blood on the coat to take to Jacob.
I don't think he's ever mentioned as being there. I said, I
Yeah,
think
I
the
don't
inference
think
that we
he
have
was
to make
there.
here is that he was gonna rescue the boy. If he's gonna rescue the boy, he would be opposed to selling him. So, he may have been taking his turn to be with the flocks when they sat down for that meal, and then the traders came along.
Right.
And so, they kept the coat, sold the boy, now we gotta do something to convince Joseph.
29. Reuben returned unto the pit. Behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned to his brother and said, The child is not, and whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed the kid and
Okay,
put the blood on the
okay,
coat.
he may have been there.
Because that's after he was gone out of the pit, because they'd already sold him.
All right.
But they had the coat, but it didn't have blood on it.
But, you could assume that Reuben was there when they did that. But that question, the lad is no more, and where shall I go?
That's
Would
before they-
suggest that he left somewhere, maybe in
No, I'm saying
sorrow.
he left and he came back.
But when it says, where shall I go, it sounds like he left then.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
In
like.
sorrow, because they told him that he was dead, the boy was dead. After he left, then they put the blood on the tunic to take to Jacob, to show Jacob that he was dead. That's what I'm suggesting, but I'm not saying that you're wrong. Okay? Does that, let's see.
Go ahead and say it.
Did that work kind of with the State of the Union address last night? All right, let's look at verses 27 and
You
28.
still have a question after you get to heaven, you can ask.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. Debbie, you want to read verses 27, 28 for me, please?
But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, My money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, What is this that God has done to us?
All right, in your handout, this would be capital letter G. And as you see up there, the goodness of others can be perceived in the wrong way. Joseph was doing something good, but now at this point, because of everything that's taking place, they look at it in a different way. Because after a day's journey, one of the brothers opens his sack to feed his donkey, and here's when he finds the money. So finding the money there, the rest were hesitant to open their own sacks to see what might be in those sacks. And you see that statement, their hearts failed them. What this is suggesting is their guilt made them afraid. Otherwise, they would have rejoiced at finding the money there. But all things terrify an evil conscience. And remember, Simeon's still back here in prison. So this made them think some design was laid to undo them all. And so that statement, what is this that God has done to us? These brothers believe that this chain of events is divine punishment for what they had done to Joseph. Following the mindset that all good is a reward for righteousness and all evil is punishment for wickedness. Yes?
I think when Joseph told them, when he said, I fear God, they're all wrong. That got them thinking, and from then on, man, that their guilt started hitting them, man, and it's just so, everything, they start thinking, and the guilt starts hitting them,
Yeah.
big time, big time.
Things haven't been totally going their way because they've already been accused of being spies. And now they're afraid they're going to be accused of being thieves. They have to go back and tell their father that Simeon wasn't allowed to come and be with them, that he's still in Egypt in prison. John?
Guilt took a long time to hit them, didn't
It did. But sometimes that's the case until something happens. It takes a long time for it to hit them.
It's like the dreams that Joseph had. Look how long it took for that to come to fruition. And that's sometimes how God works.
Yeah. And you look at society today. I mean, look at some of the terrible accidents that's taking place. Maybe someone who is an alcoholic, they end up having an accident and maybe kill somebody. And they spend the rest of their life in remorse, regretting it. And oftentimes they may change, or they may not. But generally some tragic event will cause people to recognize that, hey, I'm lost without God. And so this is kind of where these brothers are headed at this point. They're really thinking about what's taking place. So let's look at verses 29 through 36. Lawrence, you want to read that?
Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, We are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened, as they emptied their sacks, that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simon is no more, and you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me.
All right. So, as I have up there, when self has been afflicted, it is difficult not to grieve. Capital letter H in your handout is the
We're all a little too old, we're not used to that.
That's right.
You're
I
swell. I didn't
raised
hear
my
anything.
children, somebody else can raise theirs.
I hear that all day.
Yeah, well,
He really does.
just because you suffer, we don't have to.
The kids ain't no suffering.
Okay, so this is on page 108, capital letter H for your handout. So what's happening here now? The brothers tell their father about their stay in Egypt. Now, what's the word they use about Joseph?
There's no more.
He was rough with me, with us.
One says harsh.
But they did not really tell him everything that took place there. They left out being imprisoned themselves for 3 days and finding money in one of the sacks prior to getting to the house. So this left out the situation with Simeon also and changed the threat of life or death to a promise that they could trade in the land. Well, Jacob is concerned now. Okay, I've already lost Joseph. Now I've lost Simeon. And you want to take my youngest son back and I'm going to lose him too? Apparently the others did not check their sacks at the same time that one brother checked his sack, okay? Because they didn't seem to find the money until they got there with their father. Each time, when you look at Genesis 37th chapter, I'll get you in just a second, John, and chapter 42, Jacob's sons have left home. They have returned to their father minus a brother. First time minus Joseph, now minus Simeon. But with extra silver in their possession. First time, money for selling Joseph. This time, money that Joseph put back in their bags. Jacob, his distress begins and ends his speech with self-pity. But here he speaks more truthfully than he knows regarding Joseph. They had bereaved him, and how their already sensitive consciences must have stung to hear the words that Jacob spoke. Jacob has no intention of sending anyone back for Simeon. He was as good as dead in his mind. And that's why he said, I've already lost Joseph, now I've lost Simeon, and you want to take my youngest
Well,
back?
finding the money is what does it, he said.
Yeah, finding that money. Because he said, you have bereaved me. John, you had a...
I was just gonna say, I find it hard to believe the rest of them didn't feed their animal all the way back,
Well, they may have fed the animals from that one bag.
so.
I mean, that's the assumption I make, is that, because when you consider the bags of grain that they had there, they didn't need to open up an individual bag. They could open one bag to feed their animals and go back. That's my thought. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Another meaning for retrieve.
Do what?
I need to know, I'm not sure. I know-
Bereavement?
Yeah, you got another meaning, another way of saying it?
You have,
Cause me grief.
you caused me grief, you
Great
made me
sorrow.
ill-minded, do what, Cal?
Great sorrow.
Great sorrow, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. You brought great sorrow upon me. Good question. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's look at verses 37 and 38, Donna.
Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, You may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you. But Jacob said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow.
All right, so now Reuben here, being the oldest, tries to take responsibility and give assurance to his father. And this is on page 108, capital letter I of your handout, and capital letter J on page 109. So this accusation that somehow the brothers have contrived the loss of both Joseph and Simeon prompts the reckless and otherwise inexplicable outburst of Reuben. Reuben shows that since his sin with Bilhah, that he has lost his place of leadership in the family. And his efforts to lead the brothers failed back in Genesis chapter 37. And now his effort to lead the family fails also. By contrast, Judah shows that he is the one whom the family follows. The brothers follow his word and sell Joseph in chapter 37. And in the next chapter, Jacob will heed Judah's words and place Benjamin under his care. Finally, it is Judah who will, as the spokesperson of the family, before Joseph in Genesis chapter 44, when we get there, Jacob's paternal favoritism continues to be breathtaking here. He speaks of Benjamin as my son, even though he still has other sons here. This is my son, almost as though the ones he is addressing were not his sons. You see that favoritism taking place there? Joseph was his favorite. He's lost Joseph. Benjamin has taken Joseph's place as his favorite. Because they were the sons of who? His favorite wife, the one he loved the most. And that favoritism has always continued throughout this whole deal. Any comments on chapter 42?
She'd been gone for several years.
Yes, yes. Any comments on chapter 42?
I understand what you're saying. It's just that if I was in that position and they were calling out one son, I might say exactly, I don't know about the rest of the sentence, but I might say, you're not taking my son. I might say that, even though I have more than one son. I might say, you're not taking my son.
Well, that's what he already has said, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. I don't know that that statement in itself means that he has a favorite, because I could see myself talking another son, saying, you're not taking my son, you know. I could see myself saying that to another son.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Debbie. The only way that I can suggest that he's favoring this son is if you go back in the previous chapters, there's evidence that Benjamin has taken Joseph's place as the favored son.
Yeah, I understand that.
But just to look at this verse here, yeah, he's got 11 other sons, or actually 10 other sons in his mind that's living, but he's not sure about Simeon now, because Simeon's back in Egypt, and in his mind, he's lost Simeon now.
Well, look at verse 38 itself.
38.
It says, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left.
Yeah, he is left alone.
But I was making the comment on the specific thing you said, my son, And I'm saying that if I have other sons, and I do have more than one son, I would sometimes say to my other son, you're not my, don't take my son, only because they would get in fights or something, and I'd say, you don't do that to my son. To make a point, you're both my sons, but this one you're gonna leave alone right now. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I was just making a comment.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I understand what you're saying, but also on the same token, if you were one of the siblings, wouldn't you feel like there was favoritism?
Yeah.
You know?
Me too.
That's how I feel.
Yes, Pat?
Well, I can't believe Reuben would say that if I don't bring, he would let him kill 2 of his own sons.
Well, Reuben is just, he's jumping in trying to get back in favor with his father. Remember now, he's committed adultery with his father's concubine, Bill.
No, but that seems hard-hearted.
I think he's sincere in what he's saying.
He is
I don't know
sincere.
he's trying to get favoritism, but he's trying to make things right.
Yeah,
He
I don't mean he's
understands-
trying to get favoritism, but he's trying to get back in.
Good favor.
He's trying to prove how serious he is about bringing him back. Right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Cal.
So, and he's willing to offer his children as hostages to his father, okay, to go back and rescue this other son. So,
Which gives the indication of his
and actually, when you get right down to it, later on, Judah does the same thing.
Yeah.
Only he offers himself as hostage.
I don't think Jacob's gonna kill his grandkids.
No.
No. No. But, I mean, that was Reuben's way of saying, hey, look, I am sincere in what I want to do, and I will bring Simeon back, yeah. All right, any other thoughts on chapter 42? All right, let's look at chapter 43. In your handout, he gives the title, Benjamin also comes into Joseph's presence. He also gives a second title, the second appearance before Joseph, or from fear to merriment before Joseph. He uses Genesis 43 verse 29 as the key verse, and the reason being is Benjamin is the focus of this entire chapter in 43, okay? So, look at verses 1 and 2. Cal, you want to read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 43 for me, please?
Sure, now the famine was in the land was severe. So it came about, when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food.
All right, so as the dreams took place and everything, the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine, when you have that many years of drought or famine, the supplies that they were able to bring back the first time was not going to last if the drought continues on. And obviously the drought is continuing on, so the household supplies always need to be replenished, and this is the case here. So any hope that Jacob had that the famine would relent and that they would not have to return to Egypt has not been realized at this point. And we cannot know exactly how long has passed since this last trip to Egypt, except that it has been less than 2 years. And the only reason we know that, if you go to, and I do have it up there, but I'll read it here, Genesis 45 and verse 6. Here it says, for these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. So that's the only reason I suggest that they've returned here in less than 2 years, okay? That phrase, when they had eaten up the grain so that they had nothing to live upon, but only the poor crop that their own country produced, which could not sustain them for a very long period of time. In fact, it couldn't sustain them at all. So the idea is buy us a little food. And he hoped it is likely the next year would be better. And so only a desire to supply just what they presently needed, hoping that next year would be better. Okay? Yes, Donna.
And they didn't know that it's going to last 7 years.
No.
Joseph did, but
Joseph did,
but they didn't know.
They didn't know.
It has to get better soon.
Yeah. And so, normally droughts don't last for that long period of time. I mean, we've had droughts here in Oklahoma a couple of years at a time and everything, but then we start getting the rains and everything's all right. And even the droughts that we've had were not so severe that they didn't get a little bit of crop.
But we can think back to the Depression.
Think back to the Depression, there was a severe drought there.
An extended time too.
Yeah. All right, was that the last bell?
But it's ring one.
It didn't wait and ring a 5-minute bell?
Yeah, we did.
We couldn't hear the closing.
Yes, all right, well, we'll begin with 43 next week then.
Yeah, we're actually, I just